A Marine haunted by ghosts of war, a military dog who refused to live after his handler's death. When their paths crossed, pain met purpose, and something divine began to stir. Through storms, fear, and blood, they discovered that loyalty can outlive death, and sometimes the loudest prayers are spoken in silence. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The morning mist hung low over the hills of Vermont, soft as breath and heavy with silence. The forest stretched in waves of crimson and gold, every maple leaf trembling at the cool wind like a whisper of farewell. A narrow road wound through the valley, ending at a small military cemetery where flags fluttered faintly under the pale sun. There, beneath the rust-colored trees, a German shepherd lay curled beside a pair of weathered combat boots. His name was Max, a military K-9 once hailed as a hero in Afghanistan. 8 years old now, his fur was a patchwork of black and gold, dulled by dust and grief. His left ear bore a small scar from shrapnel, and his eyes, once sharp with discipline, had faded to the color of smoke. For 3 days he had lain by those boots, refusing food or water, waiting for the scent of his handler that would never return. The base veterinarian had called it trauma. The officers called it malfunction. But everyone else, the ones who'd seen war up close, called it what it truly was: mourning. That morning, a truck rolled to a stop on the gravel road. The engine rattled like an old cough before dying. Ethan Miller, a former U.S. Marine, stepped out. He was 37, tall and lean, his face marked by sun and loss. A few days' stubble covered a square jaw. His eyes were gray-green, watchful, carrying the kind of quiet that only soldiers understand. He wore a brown leather jacket, worn at the elbows, and boots that had marched too many miles in silence. Ethan stood for a long time without speaking. The wind brushed through his hair as he looked at the motionless dog by the grave. On the marble stone, the inscription read, "Sergeant Cole Turner, faithful son, fearless soldier, and friend." Ethan swallowed hard. Friend. That word cut deeper than the rest. He and Cole had served together for 4 years. They'd shared the same tent, the same battles, the same hunger for home. Cole had been the kind of man who believed in things, in prayer before missions, in letters to his mother, in the quiet promise that even war couldn't steal kindness. And now he was gone, leaving behind a partner who didn't know how to live without him. A voice broke the stillness behind him. "You're late." Ethan turned. It was Captain Dean Harlow, a compact man in his 50s, shoulders square, hair trimmed to silver, eyes pale as winter glass. His uniform was pressed, but his voice carried exhaustion, the tone of someone who'd had to deliver too many folded flags to too many front doors. "Traffic," Ethan replied softly. Harlow studied him. "You sure you want this job? That dog's a wreck. Bit a handler yesterday. They're planning to put him down." Ethan looked back at Max. "Then I guess it's good I came." The captain sighed. "Your call. But Miller, this isn't about redemption. It's logistics. Take the dog to Burlington tomorrow. He'll attend Turner's funeral. After that, we'll see." Ethan nodded, but his jaw tightened. "We'll see." Those words always meant the same thing. He won't make it. When the captain left, Ethan walked slowly toward the dog. The air smelled of wet leaves and old metal. "Hey, buddy," he said quietly. "You don't know me, but I knew him. Cole." Max didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on the boots. Ethan crouched a few feet away, careful not to invade the space. "He saved my life once," he continued, voice barely above a whisper. "You probably saved his a dozen times. Guess that makes us even." The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the ground. One golden maple leaf drifted down, landing between them. Max's eyes followed its slow descent, the first sign of awareness Ethan had seen. "That's it," Ethan murmured. "You still see the world, don't you?" He extended his hand, palm open. Max's nose twitched, but he didn't move. His breath was shallow, steady, the rhythm of an animal lost between instinct and despair. After a minute, Ethan rose. "All right," he said softly. "We'll do this your way." He walked back to the truck, opened the passenger door, and returned with a folded cloth, an old marine scarf, faded olive green. He laid it near the boots. "That was mine," he said. "Smells like sweat and diesel, but maybe it'll help." When he turned to leave, Max shifted. A small sound, half whimper, half sigh, broke from the dog's throat. He sniffed the scarf once, then twice, and lowered his head on top of it. Ethan paused, eyes burning with the ache of recognition. "Yeah," he whispered, "I miss him too." The next day, the fog lifted just enough for the sunlight to break through. Ethan returned with a transport cage and a quiet determination. 2 soldiers helped load Max, though the dog resisted with low growls and stiff legs. When the latch clicked shut, Ethan leaned down, meeting his eyes through the mesh. "It's just a ride," he said. "Not a prison." The truck started up, humming low. As they drove through the maple-lined road, leaves swirled like embers in the wind. Vermont stretched around them in endless reds and golds, a landscape both alive and dying. Ethan watched the road, hand steady on the wheel. In the mirror, he could see Max lying inside the crate, alert but calm. The sun glinted off the dog's fur, a faint shimmer of gold through the gray. For a moment, Ethan thought of Cole again, of the promise he'd made when the body came home. "I'll take care of him. I owe you that much." He exhaled slowly. "Guess it's just you and me now," he said under his breath. And somewhere deep in the crate, Max's tail thumped once, a quiet, almost reluctant sound. But it was enough. Outside, the leaves kept falling. Inside, 2 broken soldiers, 1 man, 1 dog, began their long road toward something neither of them believed in yet. Healing. The morning after they left the cemetery, the world was painted in shades of fire. The hills of Vermont burned not with flame, but with color. The deep crimson of maple, the golden rust of oak, the quiet orange of dying sunlight caught in every leaf. The old Ford pickup rattled down Route 89, a weathered vessel carrying 2 survivors of the same invisible war. Ethan Miller kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting on the cracked leather of the seat, his fingers tapping to a rhythm only he could hear. The radio was off. He preferred the silence, the kind that wasn't empty but heavy, like the air before rain. Behind him, Max lay inside his crate, watching every turn through the thin grid of steel. The road's reflection danced in his eyes, the blur of trees passing by like ghosts from another life. Ethan glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You ever been up this way, buddy?" he asked, voice soft. "Cole said you hated the cold." Max didn't move, only blinked slowly, his breath fogging the metal bars. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, I don't like it much either." The truck rolled through a small town called Randolph, one of those places where the world felt paused, A diner, a post office, a church with peeling white paint. An old man swept leaves off the sidewalk while a child chased them laughing, unaware of the approaching winter. For a fleeting second, Ethan imagined Cole walking through such a place, smiling, alive. The image burned, then faded. He stopped at a gas station on the outskirts, its sign creaking in the wind. The attendant, a man in his 60s, with a red flannel shirt and oil-stained hands, ambled out of the office. His name tag read Frank. His face was carved with the lines of long winters, but his eyes held the calm patience of someone who'd seen all kinds of travelers come and go. "Morning," Frank said, his voice gravelly but kind. "Looks like you're heading north." "Yeah," Ethan replied. "Burlington." "Funeral?" Ethan looked at him, startled. "How'd you guess?" Frank nodded toward the flag sticker on Ethan's windshield. "You got that look. Men going to weddings smile different." Ethan almost laughed. "You're not wrong." As the pump clicked into place, Frank leaned against the truck. His gaze drifted to the crate in the back. "That a shepherd?" "Yeah, name's Max." "Good-looking dog." Frank whistled softly. "Smart breed. My brother had one in Nam. Brought him home. Didn't last long after. Dogs see too much, same as men." Ethan's chest tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Same as men." When the tank was full, Frank wiped his hands and handed him a receipt. "Be careful out there. Storm's coming down from the mountains tonight. Don't trust the sky when it turns yellow." Ethan nodded, thanked him, and got back in the truck. As he drove off, Max's head lifted slightly, ears twitching. "He's right," Ethan muttered, glancing up at the clouds that were already darkening at the edges. By midday, the highway narrowed into forest roads. The sun slipped behind clouds, and the air turned colder, sharper. Max began to pace inside his crate, low growls vibrating in his chest. "Easy," Ethan said, glancing back. "We're fine." But Max wasn't fine. His ears flattened, tail tucked low. Not aggression, but fear. Ethan slowed the truck, pulling to the shoulder. "All right," he murmured. "Let's take a break." He stepped out, the chill biting through his jacket, and opened the tailgate. Max hesitated before stepping out, paws crunching on a blanket of fallen leaves. He looked around, eyes wide, nostrils flaring, the instincts of a soldier scanning for threats. Ethan knelt beside him. "It's just trees, partner. No gunfire, no desert, just Vermont." Max's ears twitched at the word desert, the sound unfamiliar against this damp, living world. He lowered his head, sniffing the air, and then turned away. Ethan watched him, the ache in his chest growing heavier. He reached into the truck and pulled out a small bag of jerky. "You gotta eat," he said, offering a piece. Max eyed it warily, taking a cautious sniff. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, he accepted it, chewing silently. Ethan smiled. "There you go. Small steps." They stayed there for a while, man and dog, sitting in the quiet rhythm of fallen leaves. Somewhere in the distance a crow called, and the sound carried through the trees like a memory. When the wind picked up again, Ethan stood. "We should keep moving before that storm finds us." He reached for Max's leash, but the dog suddenly stiffened, staring into the trees. The fur along his spine rose. Ethan followed his gaze but saw nothing, just the dense tangle of birch and pine shifting in the wind. "What is it?" he whispered. Max growled deep and warning. Then, without another sound, he bolted into the forest. "Max!" Ethan shouted, heart jolting. He dropped the leash and ran after him, branches snapping against his shoulders. The forest swallowed them both, the ground slick with wet leaves. He caught glimpses of movement, a shadow darting between trees, flashes of gold fur. "Max, stop!" His voice echoed uselessly. The air smelled of rain and earth. He stumbled over roots, breath burning in his lungs. The trail curved, then opened into a clearing. Max stood at the edge of a small stream, motionless. His ears were back, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He was staring at something across the water. Ethan followed his gaze and saw it too. An old wooden cabin, half hidden under moss and vines. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. "You've got to be kidding me," Ethan murmured, wiping the sweat from his brow. Max didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the cabin, body tense but calm, as if he recognized it. Ethan approached slowly, resting a hand on his shoulder. "What is it, boy? Someone you know?" The dog didn't answer, but his tail moved once, not wagging, just a slow acknowledgement. The first drops of rain began to fall, cold and heavy. Ethan looked at the cabin again, then back at Max. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's find out who lives there." He took one step toward the cabin, and Max followed, silent and steady through the rain. The forest behind them closed in with the sound of wind and water, and for the first time since they met, they walked side by side. Not handler and dog, not strangers, but something fragile in between. Trust, just beginning to take root. The rain followed them through the forest like a whisper that refused to fade. The trees grew taller as they climbed the ridge, their trunks blackened by dampness, their roots twisting like veins through the soil. Ethan moved slowly, boots sinking into the mud, his breath misting in the chill air. Beside him, Max walked in silence, his fur slicked with rain, his body tense but alert. The cabin loomed ahead, a patch of light in the gray distance with smoke curling gently from the chimney. Ethan hesitated at the edge of the clearing. The cabin was small but well kept, the kind that looked built by hands that knew loneliness. A stack of chopped firewood leaned neatly against the porch. Wind chimes, made of spoons and shells, swayed under the eaves, their tone soft and melancholic. It didn't look like the home of danger. It looked like the kind of place where someone was still waiting for a voice that would never return. "Stay close," Ethan murmured, though Max had already stepped forward, tail low, ears flicking. The dog moved like he recognized the place, or the feeling of it. Ethan followed him up the steps and knocked. For a moment, only the sound of rain answered. Then the door creaked open. A woman stood there, perhaps in her late 50s, though grief had carved years into her face. Nora Bennett was tall and slender, her posture both weary and dignified. Her silver-streaked hair was tied back loosely, framing a face of pale, freckled skin and sharp green eyes. She wore a faded cardigan, the kind that had seen too many winters, and held a mug of tea that trembled slightly in her hand. "Yes?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Sorry to intrude, ma'am," Ethan said, removing his cap. "We got caught in the rain. My truck's a few miles back. Just needed to rest a bit." Her gaze shifted past him to Max, who stood at attention but didn't bark. "He's beautiful," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "His name's Max. He's had a rough time." "So have we all," she murmured. Then, after a pause, she stepped aside. "Come in. You'll catch your death standing there." The warmth hit Ethan first, the kind of heat that wasn't just from the fire but from life itself. The cabin smelled of pine wood and bread, of something human and kind. A stone fireplace flickered at the center of the room. Above it hung an old photograph. A man in uniform, smiling faintly, one arm around a younger Nora. Ethan's eyes lingered. "Your husband," she nodded. "James Bennett, Army Corps of Engineers. He built this place after he came home. Said he wanted somewhere the war couldn't find him." Ethan felt a pang of recognition. Did it work? She smiled faintly, though it never reached her eyes. For a while. But memories don't respect walls, mister. Miller. Ethan Miller. Nora motioned toward a chair. "Sit. Dry yourself. I'll get you something hot." Ethan hesitated, then nodded gratefully. Max followed him to the hearth, circling once before lying down on the rug. His eyes softened in the firelight, his breathing deep and steady. For the first time since Ethan had met him, Max seemed at peace. Nora returned with 2 steaming mugs. "Chamomile," she said. "It helps on nights like this." Ethan took it, feeling the heat seep into his palms. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while, the fire popping softly. Outside, the rain slowed to a steady drizzle. Nora studied him quietly. "You're military," she said at last. "Even if the uniform's gone, the posture never leaves." Ethan smiled ruefully. "Used to be. Marines. And now?" He stared into the fire. "Now, I'm just a man trying to keep a promise." "To whom?" He nodded toward Max. "His handler, a friend of mine, didn't make it home." Her expression softened. "I'm sorry." "So am I." He took a slow sip of tea. He was one of the good ones, the kind that believed there was still light left in the world. Nora looked at Max, whose head now rested on his paws, eyes half closed. "And the dog?" "Still waiting for him," Ethan said quietly. "Haven't figured out how to tell him that waiting's not going to bring him back." Nora's gaze lingered on the animal. Maybe he doesn't need words. Maybe he just needs someone who stays. Ethan looked up, surprised by the simplicity and truth of it. "You sound like you've done a lot of staying." She smiled sadly. "Too much, perhaps, but grief is a stubborn house guest. It stays until you learn to sit beside it without flinching." The firelight flickered between them. For a moment there was no sound, but the soft crackle of wood and the slow rhythm of breathing. Max shifted, his body pressing lightly against Ethan's boot. "That's the first time he's done that," Ethan said softly. "What?" "Let someone close." Nora's eyes warmed. Then maybe tonight's not about endings after all. Later, when the rain finally stopped, Ethan offered to sleep by the hearth, but Nora insisted he take the spare room. "James built it for visitors," she said, "even if none ever came." He smiled. "Then I'll be your first." "Second," she corrected, glancing toward the photograph on the wall. Ethan nodded. "Right." He lay awake that night, listening to the quiet creak of wood and the faint sound of Max breathing nearby. The world outside was wrapped in fog, the lake shimmering faintly through the window. It felt strange, this peace, this pause in the noise of memory. He thought of Cole Turner again, his laugh, his stubborn faith, the way he'd talk about God as if they'd served together. "You'll find your purpose again," Cole had said once, during a night watch in Afghanistan. "Maybe it won't look like you expect, but it'll find you when you stop fighting it." Ethan turned his head toward the firelight bleeding through the doorway. For the first time in years, he whispered a prayer. Nothing fancy, just a simple "thank you." In the morning, sunlight spilled across the wooden floor like a soft benediction. Nora was already awake, baking bread. The smell filled the cabin. Max sat by the door, tail wagging slowly, watching the lake outside. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the air crisp and gold. The lake glimmered beneath the rising sun, a mirror of calm after a storm. For the first time, Ethan smiled without forcing it. "Come on, soldier," he said to Max. "Let's go see what the day's got for us." Max barked once, a real bark this time, sharp, alive. Nora looked up from the doorway, a knowing smile on her lips. "He's remembering who he is," she said. Ethan nodded. "Maybe we both are." The fog never lifted that day. It lingered over Willow Lake like a pale shroud, dulling every sound, swallowing even the echo of footsteps. Ethan Miller stood by the porch of Nora Bennett's cabin, watching the mist drift across the water. Max sat at his side, tense but quiet, his ears twitching at every whisper of wind. The image of the hermit, that gaunt, hollow-eyed man, still burned in Ethan's mind. "You shouldn't have come." The words replayed like a loop he couldn't shut off. Inside, Nora stirred a pot of soup, the faint scent of herbs mixing with the earthy smell of wet pine wood. She looked calm, but her movements were deliberate, controlled. The rhythm of someone trying not to think too much. "You didn't tell me," she said finally, without turning around, "that the dog reacts to strangers that way." "He reacts to everything," Ethan said quietly, "especially men who move like soldiers." Nora's spoon froze mid-stir. "You think that hermit used to be one?" "I don't think," Ethan replied. "I know the look. Shoulders drawn, head slightly tilted. That's someone who's done recon. He wasn't just wandering." Before Nora could respond, a knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps that made Max spring to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Ethan's hand went instinctively to the knife on his belt. But when Nora opened the door, it wasn't the hermit. A young woman stood outside, wrapped in a dark raincoat, cheeks flushed from the cold. Lydia Graves, maybe 28, had shoulder-length brown hair plastered to her face, sharp green eyes, and a nervous energy that made her every gesture feel urgent. Her boots and jeans were smeared with mud. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said quickly. "My car broke down a few miles back. Engine just died. There's no signal out here." Nora stepped aside. "You'd better come in. Storm's rolling again." Ethan watched her carefully as she entered, noting the slight tremor in her hands. Not fear. Adrenaline. Lydia glanced at Max and froze. "That's a military dog, isn't it?" Ethan's gaze sharpened. "You know about military dogs?" She hesitated. "My brother handled one. He didn't make it home." Silence settled like dust. Nora poured her a cup of tea. "You're welcome to stay till the weather clears," she said softly. Lydia nodded gratefully, taking a seat near the fireplace. But her eyes kept drifting toward the window and toward the tree line beyond. An hour later, rain began to fall again, tapping against the cabin roof like steady fingers. Ethan sat by the window, watching water ripple across the lake. He noticed faint movement in the fog. Not the hermit this time, but something glinting, metallic. He squinted. It vanished. "Someone's out there," he said. Nora joined him, following his gaze. "Could be a reflection. Or someone watching." Lydia set down her cup. "You think it's that man from before?" Ethan nodded slightly. "He said we shouldn't be here." The dog barked once, sharp and warning. Ethan stood, pulling on his jacket. "I'll check it out." Nora frowned. "Ethan, don't. If he's dangerous, then it's better I find him before he finds us." He stepped into the rain, Max beside him, the leash taut. The forest smelled of wet bark and iron. The wind hissed through the branches, carrying faint echoes, or maybe whispers. Ethan moved silently, boots sinking into soft mud. After 100 yards, he found a clearing and froze. There, half buried beneath the pines, was an old metal trunk, military issue, its green paint peeling and stenciled with faded letters, U.S. Army, property of S.G.T. Cole Turner. Ethan's stomach turned to ice. Cole, he whispered, his best friend, the man whose dog he was carrying home. Max whined softly, stepping closer, nose brushing the rusted surface. Ethan knelt, running his hand across the lid. How the hell did this end up here? A voice came from the trees. Because he left it for me. Ethan spun around. The hermit stood a few feet away, soaked to the bone, eyes hollow yet burning with something like sorrow. You were with him, he said slowly. Ethan straightened. Afghanistan, Operation Iron Dune. The hermit nodded once. I was there too. Name's Ray Donovan. We were all part of the same unit. Cole, me, and the dog. He pointed at Max. That one saved my life once. Pulled me from the wreckage when the convoy was hit. Ethan's heart pounded. If that's true, why didn't you come forward? Why hide here? Ray's jaw clenched. Because I wasn't supposed to be alive. They left us for dead. When I came back, I saw what the war had made of me, and I didn't want to be part of their world anymore. He glanced at the trunk. Cole's wife asked me to destroy what's inside that box. Said it shouldn't exist. What's inside? Ray's eyes darkened. Evidence. Something about a cover-up. Civilians killed in a mission we were told to erase. Ethan stared at him, rain dripping from his lashes. And Cole kept it? He couldn't live with it, so he hid it before he died. The storm roared overhead, thunder cracking so close it made the earth shake. Ray's voice grew urgent. You need to take that dog and go. Whoever buried this isn't done keeping it secret. Before Ethan could respond, Max barked violently, spinning toward the trees. From the distance came the unmistakable sound of a vehicle, tires crunching on wet gravel. Headlights cut through the fog. Ethan looked at Ray. You expecting anyone? The hermit shook his head, eyes wide. No one should know this place exists. They watched as 2 dark SUVs pulled to a stop by the lakeside. Doors opened. Men stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black raincoats. No insignia, no words, just silent, professional movement. Ethan's pulse quickened. He turned to Ray. We need to move, now. Ray grabbed the trunk's handle, straining to lift it. Help me with this. They dragged it toward the back of the cabin, mud splattering their boots. From inside, Nora's voice called out, frightened, Ethan, what's happening? Stay inside, he shouted back, and lock the door. Max barked again, teeth bared, fur bristling. The sound of footsteps approached fast, heavy, synchronized. Ray looked at Ethan, rain streaming down his face. They're not here for me anymore. Ethan frowned. Then who? Ray's eyes flicked toward the cabin. They're here for her. Thunder cracked again, drowning out the rest of his words. And through the sheets of rain, a shadow moved, tall, deliberate, aiming straight for Nora's door. The morning sun filtered softly through the trees as Ethan drove north toward Burlington. The storm had passed, leaving behind streets glistening like polished glass, and a silence so profound that even the wind seemed reverent. In the passenger seat, Max lay curled up on a blanket, his fur damp but clean, his breathing steady. The bandage on Ethan's arm had loosened overnight, a faint crimson stain marking where Max's panic had turned to pain. Yet, looking at the shepherd now, Ethan felt no anger, only a fragile gratitude that they were both still here. Vermont's autumn hills unfurled ahead of them like a vast ocean of gold and rust. For the first time in a long while, Ethan rolled down the window. The air carried the scent of pine and cold water, and for a fleeting second it smelled like home. When they arrived at the military cemetery, the sky had turned a soft pewter gray, the kind that comes before snow. Rows of white headstones stretched in perfect formation, each one carrying a name, a story, a silence. Ethan parked beneath a massive maple whose leaves still clung to their branches, defiant against the coming winter. He stepped out, adjusting his worn leather jacket, his breath a pale mist. Then he opened the door for Max. The dog hesitated, his amber eyes searching Ethan's face. "It's okay, boy," Ethan whispered. "He's waiting for you." Max stepped out, limping slightly, and followed Ethan up the narrow gravel path. The rhythmic crunch of leaves underfoot was the only sound between them. When they reached the grave, Ethan stopped. The tombstone bore the name Sergeant Cole Rivers, and beneath it a small engraving read, "He fought with honor. He loved with faith." Ethan's throat tightened. Cole had been more than a comrade. He had been the man who once pulled Ethan from the wreckage of a convoy, the one who told him, "Don't mistake survival for living." Max walked ahead and lowered himself beside the headstone. He pressed his muzzle against the pair of old mud-stained combat boots that someone, perhaps the widow, perhaps a friend, had placed there earlier. His body trembled, then grew still. Ethan knelt beside him, his hand resting gently on the dog's back. "You made it, buddy," he murmured, voice breaking. "You did what you were meant to." A priest stood a few yards away, gray-haired and gentle-faced, his black coat fluttering in the breeze. Father Lawrence, mid-60s, had been chaplain to Cole's unit. His blue eyes were weary but kind, carrying the calm of someone who had seen too much death and still believed in grace. "You must be Miller," he said softly. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. "Cole talked about you," the priest continued. "Said you were the stubborn one, the man who wouldn't pray but always showed up when it mattered." Ethan managed a small, crooked smile. "Sounds like him." "He asked me once," Father Lawrence said, glancing at Max, "what happens to the souls of animals who serve? I told him that if God made them guardians of men, then surely heaven must have a place for them too." His words lingered in the air like incense. Ethan felt something warm rise in his chest. Not grief, not even peace, but something deeper, like light breaking through a fog that had lived in him for years. As the priest began the final prayer, Ethan bowed his head. Max stayed still, his gaze fixed on the photograph of Cole propped against the stone. When the rifle salute cracked through the air, Max didn't flinch. He simply closed his eyes, as if the sound was familiar, almost comforting. After the crowd dispersed, Ethan stayed. He placed his hand on the cold marble. "Rest easy, brother," he whispered. "I'll take it from here." As he stood, Max pressed against his leg, silent and steady. The maple above them swayed gently, and a few golden leaves drifted down, one landing on Max's head. Ethan smiled faintly, brushing it off. "You ready to go?" he asked. Max gave a quiet whine, not sadness, but understanding. On their way back to the truck, they passed Father Lawrence once more. The priest handed Ethan something small, a rusted dog tag on a thin chain. "Someone left this at the gate this morning," he said. "Thought it might belong to you." Ethan turned it over, heart stopping when he read the faint engraving, "Faith." He looked up sharply, scanning the empty road, but there was no one there. The air was still. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. Ethan held the tag tightly, then slipped it over his neck. When they reached the truck, Max jumped in without hesitation. Ethan started the engine, and as they pulled away, the clouds broke apart. Sunlight spilled through the trees, setting the world ablaze in gold. For the first time in years, Ethan spoke a prayer, not with words, but with quiet thankfulness. Max rested his head on Ethan's lap, eyes half closed, a picture of calm. The road ahead wound through forests of fire-colored leaves, endless and alive. Ethan didn't know where they were going next, but it no longer mattered. The storm had passed, and somewhere beyond the horizon he knew. Cole was smiling. Sometimes God doesn't send miracles wrapped in light. He sends them quietly, in the shape of a loyal dog, a friend who stays, or a moment of forgiveness that changes everything. Ethan and Max's story reminds us that healing doesn't come when we forget the pain, but when we choose to love through it. Maybe tonight, as you sit in your own quiet corner of the world, look at the ones beside you, the people, the pets, the small blessings you still have, and whisper a prayer of thanks. Because every heartbeat, every wagging tail, every sunrise is a message that God is still with us. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Leave a comment below, tell us what part moved you most, and subscribe for more stories of faith, love, and the miracles hiding in everyday life. May God bless you, your family, and every faithful companion who walks beside you.